In the quiet corners of many lives, something invisible has taken root. It arrives not as a storm, but as a gentle erosion, like a slow wind wearing away the shape of a mountain. No one sees it happen. No one talks about it aloud. And yet by the time it has settled, something precious has already been stolen. Imagine a woman, 68 years old, sitting at her kitchen table in the soft amber glow of early morning. The toast is warm, the tea gently steaming, her house is tidy, her life organized. But somewhere in her chest, beneath the steadiness, is a whisper she can't quite name. It says, "You are no longer needed." And because it was never shouted, she believed it must be true. This is the most dangerous kind of lie, the one that slips into the soul without resistance. A lie so quiet that it sounds like your own voice. In Buddhist thought, this is a kind of delusion known as moha, not the loud confusion of chaos, but the soft fog of forgetting your worth, forgetting your place in the fabric of things, forgetting that your breath still stirs the air and your presence still leaves an imprint, whether seen or not. An old Zen saying tells of a monk who asked his master, "What is the greatest tragedy in life?" The master replied, "To think the tea has no flavor simply because the cup has aged." The woman at the kitchen table is not alone. Her story is echoed in countless hearts. People who once carried careers, raised children, taught lessons, held hands through grief and joy. People who, somewhere after 60, began to feel like the world had turned a page without them. And slowly they began to shrink, not in body, but in spirit. But the Dharma teaches that age is not the end of becoming. It is simply the deepening of it. You are not too old, you are simply unused. Like a well-worn book placed gently on a shelf, your wisdom has not faded. It has only been waiting for someone to open its pages again. The years behind you were not an exit, but a preparation. Not a fading, but a refining. Think of the lotus blooming not in haste, but in patience. Its roots buried in murky waters, unseen. Its leaves gathering light, slowly. And then, one morning, without ceremony, it opens. Could it be that you are at such a moment now? Stillness is often mistaken for peace, but a quiet life is not always a peaceful one. Stillness can cradle serenity, or it can cradle sorrow. The difference lies not in the silence, but in whether the soul is still growing inside it. There is a kind of spiritual suffering that wears the mask of calm, a numbness that passes for contentment, a polite resignation that pretends to be wisdom. But equanimity, upekkha in Buddhist practice, is not passive. It is the clarity that arises when we are fully awake, unshaken, not because we feel nothing, but because we see everything with compassion and truth. One man, retired and alone in a small town in Oregon, spent years in such a silence. He rose each day, read the news, fed the birds. To others, he seemed serene. But one winter morning, while watching a squirrel scramble across his windowsill, something inside him broke open. He began to cry, not out of sadness, but from the realization that he had not felt alive in a very long time. The squirrel had reminded him, life moves, and in that moment, he remembered, so must he. So he began to paint again, not for anyone else, not for show, just to feel the color move through him. And in that movement, the lie began to crumble. You too may find that the ache you carry is not the absence of joy, but the absence of motion, not the loss of youth, but the loss of wonder. And that can return. You do not need to wait for permission. The path is not closed. Your hands still know how to create. Your heart still knows how to connect. Your story still knows how to unfold. You are not at the end. You are at the edge of deeper meaning. There is a Japanese term, yoji jukugo. It refers to 4 character idioms. And one of them is Ichigo Ichi. One time, one meeting. It points to the sacredness of each moment, each encounter, as if it will never come again, because it won't. Life, in its most truthful form, is a string of unrepeatable moments, each one quietly asking, "Are you here for this?" But what happens when we stop showing up for our own life? Over time, routine becomes ritual, and ritual becomes rust. We wake, we eat, we sit, we sleep, but without the light of presence, these acts become hollow. The soul becomes quiet, yes, but not in peace, in withdrawal. A Buddhist elder once said, "There is a silence that frees you, and there is a silence that buries you. Learn to tell the difference." Stillness, when it comes from insight, is luminous. It is the mountain unmoved by the wind. But stillness that comes from fear, from weariness, from the subtle belief that your time has passed, that is not stillness, that is stagnation in disguise, and that is what many unknowingly settle into. You may have heard it yourself. Well-meaning phrases like, "You've earned your rest," or "Now, just enjoy your golden years," as if enjoyment were only found in inactivity, as if purpose had an expiration date. But within Buddhist philosophy, nothing is fixed, not even identity. Anatta, or non-self, reminds us that we are not one solid thing. We are process, we are river, we are becoming. And if that is true, then there is no age when we stop becoming. There is only forgetting or remembering. There's a story told in a Thai monastery where a young monk struggled with doubt. He believed he was failing at his practice. His thoughts were scattered, his efforts clumsy. An old monk sat beside him and placed a small clay cup between them. "See this cup?" he asked. "It has cracks, it has stains. It cannot hold as much as it once did, but every morning I drink from it, and it still holds what I need." He smiled gently. "You are that cup." The young monk wept, because the old man had not told him to be better. He had told him he was already enough. What if you are not broken? What if you are simply carrying more than you were ever meant to carry alone? This life, your life, has not been a straight line. It has curved through sorrow and light, through love and abandonment, through discovery and forgetting. But each turn was not wasted. Each moment was shaping you. You have been preparing, not fading. And so we return to the question the Dharma quietly asks, not, "How old are you?" but "Are you awake?" Because awakening is not about youth. It is about honesty. It is about looking at your life as it is, not as it was or as it should have been, but as it is, and seeing that even now it breathes with meaning. In Buddhist tradition, the lotus is often used to represent the purity of wisdom rising from the murkiness of life. But not all lotuses bloom at dawn. Some bloom when the light is softest, when the sun is not blazing, but dimming, and in that gentler light, their beauty is no less radiant. Perhaps your blooming is still coming. Perhaps everything behind you was not the final act, but the groundwork for a kind of flowering, only now becoming possible. The world tells a lie, that purpose is something you must find, something new, something distant. But the Buddha taught that the truth is already within, not found, but remembered. You do not need to climb a mountain. You do not need to start a foundation or chase a legacy. You need only to pause, to listen, and to begin brushing the dust from what you already know, what you've always known. What if meaning has been waiting for you in the most ordinary places, beneath the gardening gloves, inside a letter never sent, in the old piano gathering dust, or in the words you were always afraid to speak aloud? One breath, one step, one act of being fully here, and something stirs, a spark, and from that spark, a small flame. The body stiffens, the mind dulls, and the heart closes. Not always from age, but from stillness without soul, from repetition without presence, from movement that becomes mechanical. Over time, this stagnation doesn't just weigh us down, it wraps around us like fog, soft and quiet, until we no longer remember how it felt to feel alive. But what if the cure isn't as distant as we imagine? The Buddhist path is not a sprint. It's not a grand vision of transformation overnight. It is a walk, a mindful, humble walk, along what is known as the middle way, a path of balance, of returning again and again to movement, not frantic motion, but awakened motion. A woman named Teresa once lived in the suburbs of Pennsylvania, a retired school teacher in her early 70s. She spent her days in careful routine, making breakfast, feeding the cat, watching the morning news, everything in order, everything safe. One autumn afternoon, her granddaughter visited and asked a simple question, "Grandma, do you still dance?" Teresa blinked, surprised by the memory it stirred. She hadn't danced since her husband died. She hadn't even played music aloud in years, but something nudged her that evening. She opened the drawer where her old CD player had rested for decades, dusted it off, found the album they used to dance to in the kitchen. She pressed play. It wasn't graceful. Her knees ached, her back protested, but her eyes sparkled. Her body moved, however awkwardly, and her spirit followed. She wept and laughed, and for the first time in years remembered what joy felt like. That night, something shifted, because movement rekindles the flame. To move the body is to awaken presence. Even a short walk, a stretch, a turn of the wrist while stirring soup. It's not about exercise, it's about feeling yourself here. To move the mind is to invite curiosity, to read something new, to ask questions, to wonder again. Not with urgency, but with the kind of gentle attention a child gives to falling leaves. And to move toward others is perhaps the most sacred movement of all. When you reach out, even in small ways, a phone call, a letter, a shared silence, you are stepping once more into compassion. You are walking again the Bodhisattva's path. The Buddha didn't ask us to retreat forever. He asked us to return with wisdom. And sometimes that wisdom looks like a trembling hand reaching out, or a smile offered when no words can be found, or a story shared that makes another soul feel seen. You may think you have nothing left to give, but your presence, honest, imperfect, open, is a kind of medicine. In Zen, there is a teaching that the sacred is not somewhere else. It's here, now, in the teacup, the broom, the garden, the conversation at the bus stop. It is not the size of the act that matters, but the depth of awareness within it. One woman, widowed and living alone in a small New Mexico town, began each day with the same routine. She swept her front porch, rain or shine. She did not speak much. Most thought she was simply keeping her space clean, but over time, her neighbors came to see something deeper. Her sweeping was slow, deliberate, like a ceremony, and children would sit nearby and ask her questions, watching her brush the dust with care. She rarely gave long answers, but her silence was kind, her attention full. She had become unknowingly a mirror, and that is the truth. We forget. Even in solitude we reflect. Someone is watching you, maybe not visibly. Maybe it's the cashier who notices your gentleness, the neighbor who sees your quiet consistency, a stranger who hears your laughter and remembers their own joy. You are still teaching, not by preaching, but by being. Your story, its wounds, its wisdom, its ordinary moments, is needed, not someday, not after you fix yourself. Now, because this moment is not waiting for a perfect version of you, it's waiting for the real one, the one who still burns quietly beneath the routine. and that fire can grow. You don't need a big dream. You don't need to change the world. You need only to find one small spark of aliveness and feed it gently. Somewhere along the way, the world began to tell a story about aging, not with cruelty, but with a kind of patronizing softness. It said, "Step back, be careful, don't dream too loud." It wrapped those words in politeness. "Take it easy, you've done enough." As if rest were the same as withdrawal, and stillness the same as irrelevance. But the truth is quieter still, and far more powerful. You have not become invisible. You have been preparing. In the same way a mountain gathers snow before spring, in the same way a fruit ripens slowly under unseen sunlight, your life has not been idle. The moments behind you were not empty. They were sculpting you, layer by layer, season by season. And perhaps now is not the end of the journey, but the turning towards something deeper. A monk once asked his teacher, "When will I know I am ready?" The teacher replied, "When you realize you already are. For decades, you may have been pouring yourself into others, into roles, responsibilities, sacrifices, into quiet endurance. And now, you might stand at a strange precipice. The roles have changed. The world seems faster. Your name no longer called with urgency. But what if this stillness is not rejection, but invitation? The Dharma does not measure time the way the world does. It does not ask your age, your accomplishments, your legacy. It only asks, are you awake? Are you willing to see this moment, not as a fading, but as a ripening? There's a tale from Sri Lanka about a man who, at 75, began planting mango trees. His neighbors laughed. "You won't live to eat the fruit," they said. He smiled. "That's true, but someone will." He understood what many forget. That purpose does not need an audience. It only needs sincerity. And sometimes, your deepest offering is not what you do, but what you embody. There is a kind of elder who becomes not a shadow of their former self, but a lighthouse for those still caught in storm. Not because they give advice, but because they listen differently, see differently, walk slowly with the weight of grace. You may feel your story is ordinary, but ordinary is sacred when told with honesty. In fact, the most healing stories are not the loud ones. They're the whispered ones, the ones passed over tea, the ones shared in passing, the ones that say, "I've been there too, and I'm still here." And in that here-ness, others find hope. You are still a mirror. Someone, somewhere, needs to see your life just as it is, needs to witness your resilience, your quiet humor, your steady kindness. You may never know their name, but that does not diminish your impact. This is the Bodhisattva's vow, not reserved for monks or saints, but for any being who chooses to live with presence, with compassion, with remembrance of truth. And sometimes, that vow looks like a hand reaching for another, a story shared without conclusion, a meal cooked with attention, a silence held without fear. Because in a world obsessed with progress and productivity, the greatest gift may be your stillness, that sees, that feels, that remembers. So the question is not, what do I have left to prove? It's, what do I still carry that someone else may need? That could be a memory, a way of making soup, a lullaby, a lesson you learned the hard way, or simply your way of holding grief without letting it define you. You are not disappearing, you are softening. And in that softness, something shines through. Not loud, not flashy, but real. The world doesn't need your younger self. It needs your present one. Your presence now is the offering. Have you ever noticed how shadows grow longer in the evening light? They stretch and soften, not to frighten us, but to remind us of form, of shape, of contrast. In the same way, your later years are not a diminishing but a deepening, not a closing down but a widening of the soul's lens. And yet, how often we respond by shrinking. We shrink to stay safe. We shrink our desires, our routines, our expressions, not out of cowardice, but out of habit. Somewhere along the way, shrinking felt easier than risking, quieter than longing, safer than feeling. But peace does not come from hiding. True safety in the Dharma arises from openness, not avoidance. It arises when you meet life not by retreating from it, but by softening into its mystery. A Buddhist teacher once said, "You cannot disappear your way into peace. You can only dissolve the illusions that keep you from it." This is not about becoming loud or chasing change. It's about unshrinking, about gently stepping out of the small container you were taught to live in and realizing the air still welcomes you. A man in his early 80s once described this sensation after deciding on a whim to join a community poetry circle. "I hadn't written in 60 years, he said. "I didn't even think I had anything to say." But he went, and he wrote. And when he read aloud his simple, trembling lines about feeding ducks in the park and missing his wife's laughter, the room was silent. Not from awkwardness, but reverence. That day something uncurled in him. "I didn't know how much of me had gone quiet," he said, "until I heard my own voice again." How much of you has gone quiet? And can you forgive yourself for that? Shrinking often begins in response to something real, a loss, a disappointment, a sense that we are no longer central to others' lives. But over time, it becomes a way of living. We become experts at taking up less space. Yet the soul does not want smallness. It wants truth. And truth, even when whispered, is expansive. It may begin with something simple, wearing the color you used to love, saying no when you're tired, saying yes to something new, rearranging the furniture, writing the story only you can tell, or simply sitting in silence, not as an escape, but as a sacred return to the self that never left. The Buddha did not offer enlightenment as a way to transcend life. He offered it as a way to be more fully in life, with eyes unclouded, heart unguarded, breath unhurried. And this presence, this full aliveness, is available even now, especially now, because you no longer need to rush. You no longer need to prove. You no longer need to mold yourself into someone else's idea of worth. You need only to be. And in that being, to feel again the quiet joy that arises when you stop shrinking and let yourself expand into the fullness of who you already are. What if the final chapter of your life is not a winding down, but a crescendo? Not a soft retreat, but the unveiling of your truest form. So often we imagine life like a mountain. Youth is the climb, adulthood the peak, and old age the descent. But in Buddhist philosophy, time is not linear. It is circular, rhythmic. A flower does not mourn when it falls. It nourishes the soil for something else to grow. And perhaps you too are entering not an ending, but a blooming of a different kind. In Zen, there's a phrase, kensha, seeing one's true nature. And that seeing doesn't always happen in youth or in the rush of achievement. Sometimes it happens only when the noise falls away, when the striving fades, when all that remains is presence, breath, and being. There is a story told in the Tibetan tradition of a hermit who lived high in the Himalayas. For decades, he practiced in solitude. People called him holy, enlightened even. But in his final years, he stopped meditating, he stopped fasting, he stopped reciting mantras. Instead, he spent his mornings feeding stray goats and humming to himself. When asked why, he said, "Now I no longer seek enlightenment. I let it come to me when it wishes. And while I wait, I share what I've gathered." He understood the final chapter is not the time to chase. It is the time to offer, not out of pressure, not out of obligation, but because you are overflowing with experience, tenderness, laughter, ache, and someone out there is still hungry for the nourishment you carry. The mistake is thinking your value came from doing, but the deeper truth is that your value was always in being. There is a shift that happens when we realize we no longer have to prove ourselves. The energy once spent on trying to be seen can now be poured into seeing others. The hunger for success transforms into a gentler longing to understand, to connect, to forgive. You may look at your life and wonder, what did I lose along the way? But perhaps the better question is, what do I still carry that someone else needs? Maybe it's the way you hold silence when someone cries. Maybe it's the story of how you rebuilt after being broken. Maybe it's your ability to laugh at small things, or your courage to wake up, even when the mornings feel heavy. There's a Vietnamese teaching that says, the lotus does not bloom in clean water, it blooms in mud. And what if the mud of your life, the grief, the mistakes, the detours, has not stained you but ripened you? You do not need to start over. You need to return to yourself, to what was sacred before the world told you who you should be, to the parts of you that feel warm and honest, to the moments that asked for your full attention and that you are finally ready to answer. Your final chapter is not about resolution, it's about revelation. It's about revelation, the unveiling of a self who is no longer afraid to be soft, who sees aging not as erasure but as exposure, as the beautiful peeling back of everything that was never truly you. There is a kind of radiance that only comes with time, not in spite of the years but because of them, a grace that does not need spotlight or applause, a light that shines not from ambition, but from quiet presence. That light is already within you. All that remains is to stop covering it. In a world obsessed with speed and spectacle, we often forget the quiet revolution of small things. We search for grand awakenings, dramatic signs, sweeping transformations, believing that if purpose does not arrive with fireworks, it must not be real. But the teachings of Zen remind us, the sacred is not in the spectacular, it is in the ordinary. The steam rising from a cup of tea, the feel of sunlight on aging hands, the way breath comes and goes without needing permission. You don't need a big dream, you need only a small spark. A single moment of aliveness, fully felt, can rekindle a forest of joy. There's a story from the Soto Zen tradition of a monk who spent years searching for truth through arduous practice, meditating for hours, fasting, debating scriptures. Still, he felt restless. One morning, exhausted and disillusioned, he sat by the monastery garden and watched an old gardener trimming a bonsai tree. The gardener noticed him and asked, "Why so troubled?" The monk replied, "I seek truth, but it remains hidden." The gardener smiled and said, "Perhaps truth is small enough to hide in a leaf." That afternoon the monk sat again, but not with force. He sat with the simplicity of watching a single leaf fall, and in that moment his heart softened. The search ended, not because he found a new answer, but because he stopped trying to outrun the ordinary. Many older souls carry this quiet ache that their time for greatness has passed, that they've missed the window to matter. But what if your true offering was never in the scale of your actions, but in the depth of your attention? A woman in Texas, widowed and living alone, began painting again after decades, not to sell, not to display, just small watercolors of birds and herbs and sky. She hung them on her kitchen wall. Her grandson visited one day and asked why she painted. She smiled. "So I remember. I'm still here." The act of creation, however modest, was her way of saying yes to life again. This is the secret. Aliveness doesn't require permission. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need youth. It needs presence. The Buddha did not ask his followers to abandon the world. He invited them to meet it with clear seeing and open hearts, to walk slowly, to bow often, to taste each moment as if it were the last, because in truth it is. Even the act of breathing, when done with awareness, becomes a kind of prayer. You might wonder, what's the point? The point is this: the more you meet the present moment with care, the more you begin to remember who you've always been beneath the noise. You may have forgotten your spark, but it has not forgotten you. So begin simply. Write one sentence. Take one walk without your phone. Plant something. Anything. Light a candle at dusk. Look someone in the eye and really listen. Do one small thing with great awareness, then another, and slowly, without needing to chase anything, you'll notice the ember glowing again. You do not need to become someone else. You need to return to the one who was never truly lost, just buried perhaps, beneath routine, fear, and forgetting. Every sacred journey begins with one step. Not a leap, not a declaration, just one conscious, gentle step, and the forest of joy will meet you. There is someone in this world who still needs you. Not because you are perfect or powerful or wise beyond comprehension, but because you are you, weathered and warm, with a story that only you can tell, in a voice softened by time, pain, laughter, and healing. You may never meet them. You may never know their name. But somewhere a younger soul is searching for a mirror, and in your presence, quiet, grounded, real, they will see themselves reflected in a kinder light. This is the forgotten truth of elderhood. You are not meant to vanish. You are meant to become transparent, not invisible but luminous, with all you've lived through. In the Mahayana Buddhist tradition, the Bodhisattva is not just a teacher or a sage. The Bodhisattva is anyone who chooses again and again to meet life with compassion and stay awake, even when it's easier to close the eyes. To walk with others, not ahead of them. To be present, not as a guide with answers, but as a fellow traveler with questions. You are that traveler, and your presence is a kind of lamp. But to shine, you must stop hiding. Peace is not found in disappearing. It is found when you stand where you are and let yourself be seen, not for your achievements, not for your past, but for your aliveness right now. In one Buddhist tale, an old woman approached the Buddha and said, "I have nothing left. My children are grown. My hands are tired. What use am I now?" The Buddha looked at her gently and asked, "Can you sit with someone who grieves and not turn away?" "Yes," she said. "Then you carry the medicine." We live in a culture that praises beginnings and fears endings. But what if the final chapter is not an ending at all? What if it's the place where you finally stop striving and start offering? Not, what do I still want from life, but what do I still have to give? And not in large, loud ways, but in the quiet gestures that shift entire landscapes. A warm meal, a listening ear, a moment of calm presence when everything feels uncertain. In Buddhist teaching, dana, generosity, is the foundation of all practice. But dana is not about money or status. It is about giving of yourself, your time, your attention, your essence. And that essence has only become more beautiful with age. You may carry scars. You may carry regrets. But these are not disqualifications. They are your credentials in the school of being human. And someone needs to see how you've survived, how you've softened, how you've stayed kind. You were never meant to fade. You were meant to illuminate from within. So stop asking whether it's too late. Stop waiting for permission to matter again. The quiet lie that stole your joy, that you are no longer needed, was never yours to believe. You are needed because you are still here, and your presence, your full, awake, imperfect, compassionate presence is a gift. Sit with that. Breathe into that. Let the past rest. Let the future unfold. And let this moment, this precious, ordinary moment, be the one where you return to yourself. The person who has learned to love themselves no longer fears losing anything.